Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on this webinar. I'm Stephen Barr. I'm an engineer and with a strong background in environmental management. I work with my colleague Ravi Gidamal, who's a financier, and others in our group are deep experts in digital technologies and all the other things that we need. Both of us are veterans of public funded programs, including the Manufacturing Advisory Service, Fit for Nuclear, Grow Offshore Wind, Growth Accelerator, and also our own digital breakthrough program in the Southeast. We work a good deal with Made Smarter in Northern England and with local enterprise partnerships as well. We have a lot of private work as well, and we've been lucky enough to work with over 60 companies in just under 3 years. We're also partners with the Digital Readiness Level Tool Consortium, which includes the High Value Manufacturing Catapult, Digital Catapult, and HSSMI. Together, our day job is to run edge digital manufacturing. So we work with the somewhat heroic leaders of manufacturing businesses, battling with a range of challenges and opportunities at the moment, not least recovery from the COVID-19 situation. Also with digital adoption for productivity and competitiveness, particularly with overseas trade hotting up, and increasingly with net zero and environmental sustainability. Now, there are lots of reasons why these things come together. One of them is the sheer passion of manufacturers to innovate, not just to survive, but to thrive through periods of change and disruption. Another is the common influence of digital technologies for business and environmental improvement. If you like, profits and planet. We might use that phrase a few times in this webinar. So I hope you enjoy it, and don't be distracted by the doorbell in my background. And let's see how we get on. So just to talk through a little bit about what you can expect on this webinar. This is the second in a series on data and digital technologies in manufacturing. Our first was back in May, looking at strategic and business results from digital technologies. This time, the aim is to really help you to understand how digital tech can unlock business performance and reduce emissions at the same time. To learn a bit about what has made companies like yours, both business and environmentally sustainable, and perhaps to get you started on your own plan to save the planet and boost your business. So we're going to do it in 3 sections: manufacturing imperatives first, then digital technologies that are actually working right now in the guise of planet and profit improvements. And then we'll have a look at some case studies to look at digital technologies in practice. And then there'll be time, I hope, for your questions at the end of that. So first up, let's have a look at what we've called manufacturing imperatives around productivity and net zero. So there's a lot in the news, a lot in the media, not least about digital technologies, but particularly about net zero. And also we'll have a little look at government and what they're up to at the moment. But first, let's have a look at digital technologies. Perhaps we need a few definitions. We spoke in more detail really about industrial digital technologies and other technologies on our earlier webinar. So I recommend you have a look at that for an in-depth view. But just an overview here, when we talk about industrial digital technologies, we really mean the range of technologies and data systems recommended, supported by the Made Smarter community. So it's things like additive manufacturing, big data and analytics, industrial cybersecurity, immersive technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality and haptics. It's also robotics and process control automation, data and systems integration, mobile devices as well, artificial intelligence and cognitive learning, and also the industrial Internet of Things, sensors and connectivity as well. There's also a number of enablers which we shouldn't lose sight of. So that includes PLCs and control systems like SCADA, networks, 4G, local area networks, and so on, and also enterprise applications, by which I mean enterprise resource planning, manufacturing resource planning, CRM systems, that kind of thing. Fundamental building blocks or foundations, I should say. Also supporting general technologies like blockchain, distributed systems, if you like. And also there's some new and emerging things like 5G networks as well, just to excite us for the future. We also ought to just make sure we're on the same page, as it were, about net zero, what that means. Environmental sustainability in the broadest sense, but net zero is the common BOS phrase, perhaps, if you like to see it that way. But just to define it, so what we mean by net zero is the balance between carbon emissions and carbon removed from the air. So one minus the other gives us zero. If you want more information on that, I thoroughly recommend organizations like the World Wildlife Fund and also the United Nations Fund Committee for Climate Change. So have a look at those websites to get more information, but we'll keep with that core definition for now. Why is productivity such an issue for manufacturing? Let's start there with manufacturing's productivity imperative, as I put it here. So what I want to do is just review some data that relates to 7 leading industrial nations based on 6 years of data up to 2007. You might remember an earlier crisis, the financial crisis of 2007, in distant memory now, and also the 6 years following 2007. What we see is a big problem for the UK in particular. They're the purple color or the reddish color towards the top there. And what we can see is that the UK had one of the strongest productivity growth rates, growth in productivity in the years up to 2007, but one of the worst after that. And in fact, UK has continued to flatline in terms of growth in productivity since 2007. The Bank of England's data actually runs out in about 2014. There isn't a more recent update that I could find. But what does this mean? Increases in productivity really are essential to improving economic growth and social prosperity. Manufacturing companies are increasingly challenged to be more competitive in international markets. And many manufacturers have underinvested over many years of financial crisis, labor shortages, and so on. So these graphs should give us cause for concern. And as you may have noticed, you may be involved yourself in discussions about manufacturing's productivity puzzle. What can be done to improve productivity? We've got at least part of the answer in the discussions of digital technologies. Let me talk a bit about the imperative to drive towards net zero in manufacturing. So one reason for doing something, for manufacturing companies to do something about net zero, is simply the threat of taxation on polluters in the future. It's not kicked in yet, but it could well do in due course. The Foresight report on the future of manufacturing back in 2013 described the need for new technology for clean energy, efficient motors, improved environmental performance of products that's in use and in recycling of those products. And they were focusing in particular on the Internet of Things, robotics, additive manufacturing, cloud and mobile internet. 8 years later, I think if we're honest about it, the rate of decarbonization is still too slow in manufacturing and many other sectors. And the Committee on Climate Change has commented on this in particular. If you look at those graphs, they tell a very interesting story. So this is over 25 years. So it's a good deal of data in the time series. What you see is that manufacturing has gone from being the worst polluter down to merely the 4th worst. That's the brown line on the graph there. One of the reasons for that is that the power sector has decarbonized significantly. And of course, manufacturing is a significant user of power. But we shouldn't be complacent here. So although manufacturing has done a great deal to improve its carbon footprint, we need to bear in mind that manufactured products are the basis for a number of the other lines on that graph. So buses and vehicles used in transportation, shipping, aerospace, and so on. So all of them are direct consequences, or the pollution from those systems, those sectors, are a direct consequence of what happens in manufacturing. So what we see is a continuing need for manufacturers to design products that are actually better for the environment. So it's not just about manufacturers themselves improving their act, so making things in a better way, but also making better products, making better things. So those two things need to go together. So 2 imperatives so far, and as if that wasn't enough, we also have government worrying about what they need to do with regard to the environment. So since 2019, as I'm sure you know, the UK is committed through legislation to net zero. They were the first to do that. And the commitment was to get to net zero by 2050. And in fact, since then, certain parts of the economy commitments have been made to decarbonize even more quickly. You know what's happening in the car market, in the automotive market, committing to getting rid of polluting vehicles by 2035, I think it is. So the UK government recognises that to achieve net zero is a colossal challenge, in the words of the minister, requiring wide-ranging challenges to the UK economy and the way we live our lives. But there is opportunity here for the UK to get ahead of the competition, if you like, and to be more competitive as a result. What we have to say, though, is that government has yet to fully engage with businesses and consumers in what we would consider to be a joined-up strategy, a long-term strategy for business and environmental sustainability. And we do hope that that will come as a result of the spending review that's to come up in October this year. So that's the background, really. That's why we should all care about changing manufacturing to be more productive, more profitable, if you like, but also more environmentally sustainable. So looking after the planet as well as looking after profits. So the rest of this webinar really is to say a little bit about how that can be done. And this is based on the experience that I've had with Ravi and others with Edge Digital Manufacturing, working with a large number of companies over the last few years. So we're going to put together some evidence of how this might work. So let's have a look at digital technologies and how they impact the planet and profits as well. So first of all, it's worth starting with a way of visualizing what's going on. So we're going to use this simplified view of a manufacturing value chain. It's very much simplified. You'll know that there are lots of versions out there. Porter from 1985, the Foresight Report 2013, both published views. They tend to be traditionally shown as a linear sequence. We've shown it here as circular. Within that, though, there are three key stages: to supply, to produce, and to consume goods, products, if you like. Too often, that sequence ends at consume, with some recycling, maybe some extended life remanufacturing or reuse of products. The circular representation assumes that I can convince you of the case for a significant extension of product life cycles and recycling and recovery of valuable materials. So here goes. You can ask questions at the end that will test whether it's the logic has worked for you. So here's the concept of a green manufacturing chain. So based on that same circular sequence of three parts of the manufacturing value chain, this time it's superimposed with 10 R's, which are proposed by environmental researchers, Potting, Heckert, Worrell, and Hannemeyer, working for the Dutch Environment Agency. They built on pioneering work on the circular economy by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So R0, 1, and 2 are about smarter product use and manufacture. So we have replacement, we have reducing resource use, and we have rethinking the intensity of use of resources. But going beyond that, we're looking at extending the lifespan of products and parts as far as possible. So that's R3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So reuse of products, repairing, refurbishing, remanufacture, and repurposing products to a new use when they get to the end of their lifespan. So that all extends the life cycle. And R8 and R9 are about the useful application of materials after products and parts are no longer viable. Let me add another piece to this jigsaw. Digital readiness for green manufacturing. So we'll build out on that picture you saw earlier on, taking the idea of a circular green manufacturing value chain one step further, looking at how digital technologies drive the value chain towards business and environmental improvements. Now, digital readiness is a concept developed by the DRL Tool Consortium that I mentioned earlier on. That's Edge Digital in partnership with HSSMI, the High Value Manufacturing Catapult Centres, and the Digital Catapult. And it was described in more detail in British Standards Guide to Digital Readiness in Manufacturing, PAS 1040, where Ravi and myself were the technical authors, and we had committee support from across the industry. So first of all, what does digital readiness mean? Well, digital readiness is the maturity of a business or a team or an individual for that matter in optimizing the use of digital technologies to achieve whatever goals they have, whether they're organizational, operational, social, financial, environmental. Let's start with skills development and workforce performance and business results. So that's the bottom right of the diagram. Successful businesses are agile and responsive using digital technologies. The data they have supports real-time changes and optimizes operational performance. And key environmental considerations for the business include the ability to rethink and reduce resource use within the business, within the factory, if you like. If you have a look at external partners, by which we mean customers and suppliers, that's the upper level. The businesses relate to, the manufacturing business relates to customers and suppliers, enabling, for example, on-demand, customer-driven manufacturing. Digital technologies support after sales, customer engagement and upgrades and maintenance and so on. And the manufacturing business actively assesses and monitors the digital capabilities of its partners. But that doesn't come about unless there is collaboration, joint decision-making, planning by businesses with suppliers and customers. So that's the top level. So the manufacturer then works with customers and suppliers and other partners to understand what digital technologies are going to be appropriate, assesses and manages risks, attests the impact of new business models like servitization through life engineering, and also sets up information management standards and ways of sharing information between the business. This is before they get to actually running businesses together. Let's think about the systems, processes, and technologies that are needed to improve performance. So that's the left-hand side. So manufacturing businesses that are good at this implement digital technologies and has evidence of how IT and data and information security solutions are working for the business. Business has policies in place for capturing data, storing data, that kind of thing, and is able to use and share that data with suppliers, customers, and partners. And of course, to do that, it needs to have systems and processes and standards for cybersecurity as well. Moving on to the bottom left corner, the final piece, if you like, is a really important part. Leadership vision and a culture of innovation and continuous improvement. So manufacturers who are good at this will have a digital strategy and a roadmap for implementing digital technologies. It will have defined roles and responsibilities, and it will have a supporting business case for investment as well. Digital technologies will be fully integrated into what the business does, how it operates, how it works with suppliers and customers. And it will have plans and processes in place for investing in new ideas and supporting pilots, engaging workers, the workforce, to experiment with new digital technologies and take risks as well. So that's what we see in businesses who are really good at this kind of thing. The question is then, how does it work through into practice? So what do the technologies look like, and what sorts of business and environmental benefits can we expect to see? So this is based on our work with more than 60 companies, and also a whole range of webinars that we've been lucky enough to be part of. You probably picked up a bit of a color coding so far. So the things in green are just highlighting environmental benefits. The things in orange are more about the technologies, digital technologies. And the things in black are straightforward business benefits, manufacturing company benefits, profitability benefits, if you like. Let's have a look at the kinds of things that appear on here. So around skills development, workforce productivity and business results that emerge from that. So if you like, within factory benefits. Things like workforce productivity and waste management, we're seeing commonly as benefits of the application of digital technologies. So there's clearly performance benefits and environmental benefits working side by side. Immersive technologies, this is visual reality, that's virtual reality, augmented reality, and also haptics, touch sensitive technologies as well. Clearly also mobile devices and portals for real-time data access, because these are ways that you get real-time information in the hands of people who really need it. Other key benefits we see from the production processes are online delivery, on-time delivery, I should say. That's arising from increasing use of simulation modeling and fundamentally also enterprise applications. So if you remember, that's ERP, enterprise resource planning, and manufacturing planning as well. Just to pick a few others out from here, you can read them as easily as I can. Logistics speed. So if we can get your product quicker to market, you can also minimize delays, minimize waiting, which reduces transport energy as well. So again, a green benefit alongside the production benefit. Agile scheduling, again, enterprise applications are important for that. We see around asset productivities, this is about machine use and machine reliability. Reductions in energy use, energy optimization have been very strong, driven by simulation modeling, use of digital twins, additive manufacturing, robotics, and CAD/CAM systems. CAD/CAM, if you like, a bit of a throwback to earlier eras in manufacturing, but still incredibly common. Of course, automation of CAD/CAM is a big thing. Predictability of demand, let's not lose sight of that, and minimizing storage costs, because you don't have to have so much kit waiting for customers to ask for it to be delivered. Prediction on demand is again an increasing benefit through the use of particularly artificial intelligence, AI, as it's shortened on there. And because you have less stock required, you can have less stock wastage. Obviously, if it's sitting around in a warehouse for a significant period, particularly if it's perishable, you're going to lose a lot of material. So being able to predict demand helps you to minimize stock waste. Let's have a look at another part of the digital picture of the green manufacturing value chain. This one is about green consumption and supply. So it's around customers and around suppliers. So here, some of the key benefits that we've seen are to do with remote maintenance and the optimized control of machinery through the use of industrial Internet of Things, sensors, and connectivity. And the environmental benefit that we're seeing from that, again, is reduced energy requirements for machines. If they're not running when they don't need to run, there is a very significant improvement in environmental emissions that can be achieved. We also see on-demand production with minimum storage from customers, just as manufacturers themselves can benefit from that. Customers who receive the products can also benefit and not need to store so much of the goods that they are going to sell on or going to use. Predictable demand, again with minimum part storage, minimum stock waste as a feature. Immersive technology has really been very helpful, not just for production line workers to understand how to build or to maintain a piece of kit, but also for customers to have an input to the design process. And that's very important if we're going to increase or improve the suitability of products for an extended life cycle. So improved design really does need to have customer input to make sure that customers themselves can use those products for longer. And visual reality, virtual reality, and augmented reality have been very important in helping that to happen. So speed of access to information is a key thing, real-time decision-making. And that also results in reduced waste in the supply chain, in production, and in consumption. And we found that simulation, as well as the enterprise apps and distributed ledger technologies, are also proving very significant there. In fact, one of the case studies we'll talk about later on, we'll talk about how supply chain security can help to improve product quality along the line as well. So we'll come back to that idea of supply chain quality improvement later on. Let's talk about one of the other components of the value chain, the green value chain. And this is around green leadership. Many would think that this is the most important part, and I wouldn't disagree with that. Key things that we've found coming out of conversations with manufacturing business leaders, the ones who are good at this and have made a real impact in the environment and in business improvement. The first thing we put on this list here is around setting bold performance indicators, bold targets for business and environmental impacts together. Not to see environment as a fringe benefit, but to see it as a core part of what the business is going to do, and to set targets by which the business's improvement, the business's progress can be measured. So key parts of this then are around having transparency and consistency of information across the business about what those targets are and how the business is performing. Data-driven decision-making is a key thing, and that data, the decisions that need to be made include what to do about waste, how to reduce waste, how much to invest in reducing waste. So again, we see very much a paired benefit of environment and business here. And the key technologies, if you like, that are helping from this leadership perspective are around collaboration platforms. There are so many collaboration platforms out there that it's difficult to mention any particular ones without missing out a whole bunch of others. But any system that allows people within a business to talk to each other, to communicate ideas in an informal way, have been really effective. And also more formal systems like the enterprise applications, ERP, and so on are also ways of communicating about key performance management issues, because it's busy feeding the data continuously through the business. So how does all this come together? What can we conclude, if anything, from the work that we've seen going on with the businesses we've been lucky enough to work with? So do digital technologies really work for the planet and for profits within the business? So these are some reflections on what we've seen going on. There is real experience of using a wide range of digital technologies. There's no doubt about it. And the diversity of digital and data systems is increasing all of the time. And that's really refreshing and good, but it's also confusing, potentially confusing. Clarity is needed for confident investment in technology and people. Government has a role here. Government really needs to commit to long-term industrial strategy and long-term comprehensive strategies as well. So not merely around productivity, but productivity and environmental sustainability. At the moment, there tend to be different strategies for different things. But not just government. We, manufacturers and people involved in the manufacturing sector, need to do more at a peer-to-peer level to share information about what works and what doesn't work, the tips and the tricks, because that's what's really needed for confidence for other business leaders to invest in data and digital technologies and to really commit to making a difference with environmental impacts and in their businesses. So peer-to-peer sharing, I think, is a key part of what we need to do as an industry going forward. And certainly Edge Digital is very much involved in that. I would say most of what we do is about getting people to talk to each other. Environmental benefits have tended to be secondary to business benefits, the business focus. There's a need to accelerate change to a point where we have joined up vision for business performance and environmental performance. I think I mentioned earlier on that taxation is likely for polluting industries. So there's some incentive there, but that shouldn't be the only reason why we might move more quickly towards environmental inclusion in our business thinking. It needs to be something that is more natural to business leaders. So training and education is part of that as well. Benefits of any kind have tended to be more obvious and more convincing within the factory. So again, we need to think as manufacturers much more openly and collaboratively about how our products, the products that we make, impact society outside the factory gates, and not just to worry about emissions in the factory or within the factory gates, but what goes on outside as well. So there's a need for collaboration through the value chain to make better products that are designed from the outset to use fewer resources and to have longer life cycles. And I've mentioned already that collaboration is a key part of that. And it's not as normal as we might hope. So there's a number of good points and also negative points in there. I think what we see is huge potential for collaborative approaches to improve the environmental performance of manufacturing right the way through the value chain, but more needs to be done. What I'd like to do is look at a relatively small number of case studies of organizations that we know and love. I'm going to put 3 of them up on the screen here. So the first is Rainer Foods, and the example that I'll give is how they're working with their supply chain to improve food security and the assurance of quality in the supply chain. I'll also talk about Hosokawa Micron, who do 2 things. They use Internet of Things technologies to improve the operational quality of their own production of powder processing. That's in contract manufacturing. And also the operational quality of their customers. So they sell their machines to a number of high quality industries and companies who are producing, for example, pharmaceuticals, food, fine quality chemicals, that kind of thing, where the quality of that powder processing is crucial. So they see it from their own factory perspective and from their customers. And thirdly, Playdale Playgrounds, playground makers, as you can probably detect from the name. For them, customer quality and consumer experience are absolutely crucial. So I'll say a little bit about how they're using digital technologies to do that and also to drive environmental benefits. I should say all 3 of them are award winners, different awards for exports and for the quality of their business and for their a number of other things as well. All of them are well known to us. Rainer and Playdale have shared a conference platform with me recently, and Hosokawa Micron are well known as clients of Edge Digital as well. Let's start with Rainer Foods. So Rainer Foods Digital Sandwich Project. So Rainer led a consortium which won some funding from UKRI, from the Manufacturing Made Smarter Challenge Round, to develop a groundbreaking blockchain-based system for the food supply chain, for food supply chain security. So it's leading that consortium. A company called NetFoundry is also involved. And what they're trying to do is create a significant new piece of software that allows food and drinks businesses to connect online to share valuable data in a secure environment. The information exchange will increase productivity, improve cash flow, boost food quality, and reduce waste within the supply chain. All those are really important things for their business and also for the environment as well. They're starting in the food supply chain, in the food industry, but later they're going to move into other sectors as well. Key factor there is reduced production waste. As I've mentioned, the technologies that they're using as part of this project are artificial intelligence and blockchain, distributed ledger technologies, if you like. The zero trust networking platform is also a big part of this. And they're looking to generate a system, an open platform accessible to all in the resource chain. So they've got big ambitions. They've started on the project and they're making good progress. And we will see how they get on with that. But so far the results are encouraging, and they're looking to extend the trial out within the food sector. Next, I'll talk about Hosokawa Micron. So powder and particle processing specialist, the Rolls-Royce of particle processing, working in the pharma sector, food, chemicals, and other high-quality powder processing sectors. For them and their customers, yield quality, availability, and preventative maintenance and energy reduction are key things. And by remote control of machinery, they can optimize the way that those machines run and get benefits across the board. They're also getting reduced emissions and reduced production waste as a result as well. The technologies they're using for remote monitoring and control of processing are essentially Internet of Things, smart sensors, analytics, and also digital twin, which allows them to monitor how those machines should be operating at any given time and comparing it with how they're actually operating. So Hosokawa Micron's run by Jim Moore. Hosokawa was Engineering Firm of the Year in the chemical sector last year. And for over 10 years, they've been developing this technology and rolling it out now with all of their machines equipped with Internet of Things technology. So you get that as standard with the kit. And their own story of digital transformation within Hosokawa is as interesting as it is with their customers. So there's real experience there of how to make Internet of Things actually drive real benefits in really significant pieces of industrial machinery. Thirdly, let me talk about Playdale Playgrounds. I love their strapline, making children smile. That's a pretty good ambition. They build playgrounds worldwide. And in fact, one of their great claims to fame is getting an award for exports. And the leader of Playdale, Barry Lee, he got his MBE on the basis of that. So they're multiple award winners. The picture there is also lovely. So that's not staff doing design using digital technologies, but their customers, users of playgrounds, children getting involved in the design of Playdale's playgrounds. Hopefully giving their input to how that design should be done. But it's a lovely image of involving consumers. What they're trying to do, environmentally speaking, is to develop long-lasting products. So they're using renewable timbers, they're using recycled plastics, and they're minimizing their use of fossil fuels. And they're doing all of that through efficient design and production, through seamless delivery. They're using a range of technologies, but in particular laser scanning of playground sites so that they can convert that or draw that directly into computer-aided design. They're using simulation modeling, which is one of the things you're seeing in those photographs. They're using 3D printing of certain rather more complex or unusual components. That gives them control of waste, and it also helps them to rapidly prototype new components. They're using CNC, and they're using dynamic inventory control as well, so they can make sure that the parts that they deliver to site are exactly the right ones and that they will all fit together. Again, that reduction in wastage and reduction in time go together. So again, environmental and productivity benefits. So what we have there is 3 great companies who are really making a difference using digital technologies to improve not just their own productivity, but also environmental performance. What I'd like to say is that every company is able to do that. But I think what we see at the moment is perhaps a lack of evidence in the front line of how that can work. So just to reflect on the evidence I've put in front of you here, the industry, the manufacturing sector, still has a long way to go in terms of improving the environment at the same time as improving productivity. What we do see, assuredly, is digital technologies making a big difference. Perhaps the biggest single difference, you can attribute it to one thing, of all of the improvements that we see in the sector. But progress is slower than it needs to be. If the UK is going to meet its climate change self-imposed targets, then the manufacturing sector needs to accelerate the rate of change. We saw in those graphs from the Bank of England, from the Climate Change Committee, I should say, that the rate of progress is not quick enough. But there is potential with the use of digital technologies, from what we've seen in edge digital manufacturing. There is potential for those digital technologies to be much more widely applied. And that can only really happen if we help ourselves peer-to-peer to share information about what works, to learn the tricks, to build confidence in investment in business leaders who are already very busy and very involved in decisions within their organizations about where to invest. Government has a role to play in making that more clear as to sharing information, I should say, about what works for different types of companies. So sharing of case studies. The Made Smarter organization is doing a great job to put that together. But little information, little quantified information is being shared at the moment. So a great deal more needs to be done to give people access to information, perhaps on an anonymized basis, but nevertheless confidence building that will allow them to make the business case for investment. So what would be lovely is to maybe share some questions, and I'll do my very best to answer those. So Sadia, I wonder if you would perhaps open up with some of the questions that we've had from the audience.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephen, firstly, for delivering this webinar. It's been very insightful, lots of knowledge there shared with us, so thank you for doing that. And yes, would absolutely love to take your offer of asking some questions, as we do have a few here. So, Stephen, you mentioned that net zero has become a bit of a buzz phrase at the moment. How many companies have a net zero strategy target that is, would you say, too far away and could be interpreted as more of a tick box?
Gosh, that's a pointed question, isn't it? I would say of the companies we've worked with, very few would have more than notional targets for environmental improvement. That sounds very harsh, but that's not to say that environmental improvements are not heartfelt intentions of manufacturing companies, but what they tend not to have is targets, specific targets and specific timescales. And it's one of the reasons, one of the things that we focus on in our workshops with manufacturers, and one of the things we try to help companies to understand in terms of achievability of those targets. So not much happening at the moment, not enough happening, but and a need really for companies to be much more clear and specific about where they're trying to go with their companies from an environmental improvement point of view.
Okay, thank you. And we can see that there's a lot of clever digital technology around at the moment. And we have a question here about what's really stopping us having a circular economy. So is it manufacturing that needs to be fixed, or is it consumers?
That's a good one. So it really is both. That sounds like a cop-out, doesn't it? But I suppose if you had to pick one of those, it would be manufacturers need to do more to engage with customers, to design products that are better suited for longer life cycles. So it takes two to tango. Both sides, if you like, if there are sides in this, need to work more closely together. So major customers for manufactured products, whether they're airlines or automotive companies or consumers of sandwiches, potentially, that's probably going a little bit too far. But we all need to engage much more closely together, because one side isn't going to do all of the running here. There needs to be much more engagement, much more dialogue. As you saw with that Playdale Playgrounds slide, just getting children involved in the design of playgrounds is a fabulous idea. And I think we would love to see more of that. And the technologies are available to help. So computer simulations, as you saw there, virtual reality, augmented reality, are good ways of getting people involved in the design process, getting them to imagine what the future product will look like and feel like in practice.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. And it was great to see that case study of Playdale Playgrounds. Yes, very good. Another question here: has anyone been able to attach a sort of a monetary value, monetary savings gain to the British industry on this digital journey?
Yes, if you talk peer-to-peer with manufacturing leaders, yes, they do have information. They know how much it has cost them to invest in digital technologies. They know the kinds of benefits they get in terms of productivity. They monitor these things very closely. And they will also, increasingly, but not always, be measuring the CO2 impact as well of these improvements that they've made. But as I've said before, that's not across the board. And also that information is not shared publicly, which is probably more to your point, more to your question. So more needs to be done to share that sort of information publicly, as I've already said, on an anonymized basis, because peer-to-peer is one thing, but sharing it, broadcasting that information is more of a challenge, especially if there is a competitive concern. If you're giving away information to your competitors, that can be a big barrier to sharing what would otherwise be crucial information.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. And we talked about the importance of, sort of productivity and sustainability in this sector. So we have a question here. Digital hasn't always been an easy sell, especially to smaller manufacturers who make up most of the UK industry. So what else would you say is needed to make sure digital delivers that productivity and sustainability?
So there's a number of reasons why the take-up of digital technologies has been slower than might have been hoped for. A bit of a history, I suppose, of underinvestment in the UK manufacturing sector, particularly by small and medium-sized companies. Perhaps an attitude that organizations should be able to deal with their own problems, their own challenges. A lot of companies, smaller companies, have been set up by technical specialists, and there is a question in some companies, I think, as to whether they have the breadth of skills needed to really take advantage of novel digital technologies. So help is needed, and help is being provided, for example, by the Made Smarter program to support leaders of SME businesses in particular, to get the skills, leadership and management skills, but also to bring in the expertise to help them move forward. So government is starting to provide the kind of support that is necessary, but as we've said a number of times, there needs to be a greater commitment and more of a national spread of support for SME manufacturing leaders.
Okay. Thank you for answering that question, Stephen. I do have a couple more here. So do you think, Stephen, that we should be measuring the impact on the environment all the way to the resource extraction in other countries?
Now that's a real challenge, isn't it? So the answer has got to be yes, but the practicality is, how do we do that? I remember working with a well-known automotive company several years ago now, and we quickly realized that they only really knew who their suppliers were into maybe the second or third layer of their supply chain, whereas actually they had suppliers in principle going way back beyond that. So getting back to raw material suppliers is really very challenging indeed. But as we've seen with Rainer Foods, there is work going on to not just measure what's going on in the supply chain, but actually also to identify what companies are involved in the supply chain. With collaboration being a strong part of that, companies need to open up to share information and work together using cybersecurity to make sure that they are sharing data in a way that is appropriate to them. So I think the answer has to be yes, it has to be an ambition, but we should bear in mind that with international supply chains, that's never going to be easy. It needs to be international cooperation to make that happen.
Okay, and for our final question, we come back to that carbon buzz phrase, net zero. So are we still looking at net zero as a silver bullet and not a roadmap?
So net zero is a silver bullet. It implies that there'll be a set of strategies that really work for businesses, and it will solve all of their problems, all of their emissions related worries, and it will also save them money because they'll be using less energy. It's not like that, though, at least in the experience we've had at Edge Digital. So different companies have different challenges of productivity and also environmental performance. So the things that are working are at least subtly different and sometimes very different from different companies. So we've looked at just the differences between food manufacturing, playground manufacturing, and particle processing. you'd think it's all about production, it's all about making things. But their challenges are very different. They're all interested in high quality products. There's no doubt about that. They're all award winners in their particular areas. But that doesn't mean that their solutions for net zero environmental sustainability are going to be the same. So Playdale is able to use renewable materials, recycled materials. That's not the case in particle processing. It's fresh material each time. Food manufacture is very different as well, of course, because their supply chain will be longer from ingredients right through production into packaging and all those things that go together in production and distribution of sandwiches. So they're all different, but they all have something to learn from each other, not least the commitment to delivering on profitability and planet at the same time. So there's something they can all learn, but they will all need to take their own course and learn from other companies who are similar to them.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen, for answering all those questions for us, and again for sharing this knowledge with us today, which I'm sure will be very beneficial to our listeners. I just want to mention that the webinar was delivered under the ICT for Growth programme, Humber's ICT for Growth programme, under the hashtag #GrowMySME banner, and there are more events that are running under the programme that you can join us for, so we look forward to seeing you on those. But again, just to finish with another thank you to you, Stephen, for your time today and for putting together this presentation for us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.